Hey, welcome to another technical vid. This video is going to be about the differences, to some extent, between the as21 and the as41 cases. Now, my videos, generally speaking, aren't Volkswagen 101. So Volkswagen 101 would start with something like this. You look on the side of the case, and if it says as21, it's an as21 case. If you look on the side of the case and it says as41, it's an as41 case. Well, that's not what I do. What I do is I talk about the mechanic speak type stuff that is out there that tells you that this one or that one is so grand and glorious. And as far as that goes, it was nearly a year ago, probably 11, maybe 10 months ago, sometime in spring of 2024, early spring, like March of 2024. I was watching a YouTube video. Yeah, sometimes I encounter mechanic speak in YouTube videos. And the guy says something that's just absolutely off the freaking wall. And I hate to say it, but yeah, guy with a shop at the end of the road. And these are the people that I've warned you about this. And it's complete and total mechanic speak. So let me give you the sound bite that started me down this journey.
So the as21 is the strongest of the original VW engine cases. This has a much higher aluminum content than magnesium content.
Well, how about that? And there it is. That's how it starts. That's how it continues. It is the shop guide. Look how grand and glorious my shop is. Look at all my cars. Look at all my tools. So authoritatively, join the church of the mechanic. And everything that he said there is a lie. So let me continue down the road and show you that he is in fact bullshitting you. The problem with this is it's not, he may actually believe what he's saying, but he's presenting himself as an authority, that he knows what he's talking about. And that is the lie. He does not know what he's talking about. If you're new to the channel, that's one of the rules. Rule number one, don't listen to that guy with his shop at the end of the road. Well, I know what you're thinking. How in the world could anybody possibly think that the as21 case is mostly aluminum? It turns out it's common knowledge. And let me show you that, again, you come to the forum and you can find people who will tell you exactly that. All right, so here we got a guy. I'd like to have this explained to me a bit better. I've always been under the impression that the FI as21 case is higher in aluminum. So, yeah, it is common knowledge amongst the mechanical crowd that, yes, those cases are mostly aluminum. So should you ever encounter somebody who is spewing this nonsense to you, I want to present an argument to you that you can then present to them. And in order to do this, I need to go down to the garage and crack out my ancient case. I need the visual aid. So let's go down and do that now. Okay, so Mr. Mechanic told us that what we have here is an as21 case that has higher aluminum content than magnesium content. So we picked the case up and I don't know, 20 pounds, something like that. Let's just call it 18 pounds. Yeah, maybe it's closer to 18. So we got 18 pounds. Here's what we're going to do. It's an alloy, so it's all mixed up. But we're going to pretend that we can unmix it. And since it's higher aluminum content, we're going to put the aluminum content over here. Then magnesium content. Let's put the magnesium content over here. Now it is an alloy. It does have other stuff in it like silicon and some manganese and some crud like coppers and irons and whatnot. But they're not very high, probably about 1.5% of what's left over here. So maybe 3% of this is those other stuff. The rest of it's all magnesium. So we're going to assume that this is just magnesium because it's pretty darn close. So if this is magnesium, and one of the things you have to understand is that when they went from 1974 to 1975, from the carbureted engines to the fuel-injected engines, the case did not change. It's the same case, it's the same molding, but the only thing they didn't do was bore a hole in here for the fuel pump. Yeah, it's a fuel pump. So it's basically the same case, just a different alloy. So we take it and we pull it apart. And what do we see? A whole bunch of steel. So we get rid of the steel, like the pickup tube, and the studs and all the rest of this stuff. And what are we down to? 16 pounds? A couple of pounds of steel? 16 pounds. 8 pounds over here, 8 pounds over there. But here's the thing. Aluminum has a higher density than magnesium. So this piece must outweigh this piece. By how much? Well, it turns out aluminum is about 55% denser than the magnesium. So if this is 8 pounds, half of it is 4 pounds. The extra 0.5 whatever is an extra 0.4 pounds. So we went from 8 pounds of aluminum, allegedly it's 8 pounds of aluminum, to what it really is, which would be 12.4 pounds of aluminum, 8 pounds of magnesium. You take it all, you pump it together, it's now back to being a case. Get rid of the studs, whatnot, and we went from 18 pounds to 22.4 pounds, which if you picked up an 18 pounder and a 22.4 pounder, you would know that if this thing was higher in aluminum content than magnesium content, more aluminum than magnesium, you would know that it weighs more. Again, rule number one, you can't listen to the mechanic about how or why something does what it does. But anyway, we're going to go upstairs and we're going to take a look at the actual material properties from proper sources, not Volkswagen mechanics. So let me go through this kind of quick. All right, we go to Wikipedia and we're going to talk about magnesium alloys. Okay, what we need to do is deal with that paragraph right there. Magnesium alloys are referred to by short codes, like an as21, as41, as they've listed right there. And the designations refer to the larger alloying agents. Like the A stands for aluminum, the S stands for silicon, and the 4 and the 1 correspond to each of those letters for the amount of that particular alloying thing based on weight. So an AS41 has 4% aluminum, which it says right there, and 1% silicon. And let's take a look at the designation. All right, there's a spec that tells you how these things are labeled. So it's not something that's internal to Volkswagen. It's external to Volkswagen. So in order for a manufacturer who's building a case, in order for them to stamp on the side of it AS41 or AS21, they need to abide by the specification. And the specification involves this element, this element, this element at certain percentages. And you're supposed to meet the spec. Don't meet the spec, you don't get to slap that on there. Now there is another designation. Do you see that A right there? You may read at the SAMBA about the newer AS41 alloys that are like AS41B or something like that. The A's and the B's represent how far into the past a particular variation of that alloy was produced. Like an AS41A would be a really old AS41A, and AS41B would be a little bit newer. And as41F would be some kind of a newer type of mixing of the AS41. But it still has to be AS41. Still has to have the 4% aluminum, the 1% silicon. And then you vary the other pieces by a little tiny bit. We'll call them constituents or components. You vary the other ones by a little tiny bit. And you can vary not really the strength, but you get like machinability. You get subtle tweaks to heat transfer, and I think one of the ones that they do is manganese, and I think the manganese is put in there for corrosion resistance. But we need to now venture off of the AS team designation because we now know what they mean, that it's not an arbitrary Volkswagen designation, it is a ASTM specification that defines what the alloys are. Let's take a look now at the actual physical properties that these things have, as in the strength, which is what we're talking about here, the strength of the case. Okay, so what we're looking for is the material property, or in other words, the strength of our aluminum alloys. This particular aluminum alloy page is going to tell us about AS41. Notice that it says A-F. What that means is that it encompasses all of the AS41 alloys, A, B, C, D, E, F, all of them. As I said just a second ago, you can vary the sub pieces by a little tiny bit, and you can get subtle changes in the alloys, but the general strength of the alloy and some of the other primary properties don't change. It's an AS41. So what we're looking for is the yield strength. So we come down here and we find yield strength. Tensile strength, 20,000 psi. And incidentally, I did verify just to make sure that there aren't typos here. I found 20,000 psi at 3 other material property websites. They all said the same thing, 20,000 psi. Now, I want to go and take a look now at the as21. This encompasses all of the as21 alloys. And again, we're looking for yield strength. We come down here and it says yield strength, 17,000 psi, which tells you right there in your face, Mr. Mechanic, because the mechanics are going to tell you that the as21 is stronger. The as21 is in fact weaker than the as41. All right, now I don't like just using words saying that this one is stronger than that one. Doesn't really tell you anything. So we actually do the math. We take 20,000, we divide it by 17,000, and we realize that the as41 is in fact 17 to 18% stronger than the as21. Wow. Okay, now one of the things that you're going to hear is that, the as21 was put into place because the fuel-injected engines ran hot. What caused them to run hot was their low compression. They didn't make any power, so you had to keep your foot on it in order to get power out of them. Well, you keep your foot on the gas all the time, the thing's going to run hot. Low compression, high temperatures, that's what you get. So what we need to do is go back and find a material page that tells us whether or not, as the temperature of the case got hotter and hotter with the higher fuel-injected motor, did the material property, yield strength, at the higher temperatures of the as21 go above the as41. See, right now it's 17% below. But as the temperature goes up, maybe as the temperature went up, the as21 gets stronger. So let's find a page where we can check that out. Okay, let's take a look at the standards. First of all, we need to have a specification that comes from somebody who's competent. How about the North American Die Casting Association? Does it seem reasonable that these people might actually understand their alloys? It's their job to understand. It's not their job to assemble components for Volkswagen. It's their job to understand the alloys. So anyway, they've got a product specification standard for die casting, which we can find over here. Now, selecting magnesium alloys, let's look at some of the really cool stuff that's in here. This magnesium alloy subsection presents guideline tables for chemical composition, typical properties, die casting, machining, finishing. And then we're not really talking about die casting, we're talking about sand casting, I think. But this is as close as we're going to be able to go. Okay, this paragraph right here is very important. Alloys as41B and AE42 are used in applications requiring improved elevated temperature strength and creep resistance combined with excellent ductility and corrosion resistance. The properties of AS41B make it a good choice for crankcases of air-cooled automotive engines. Not AS21, AS41. All right, let's actually go down here and look at these properties. A quick note before we move on. I want you to make note of, if you've never heard it before, that word right there called creep. We're going to get back to that. Let's take a look at the strength properties now. All right, so this particular page has got the only temperature-based stuff I've ever been able to find on these alloys. So what we're going to look at are these numbers right there. But notice that this is a 31 and this is a 21. We don't have 41, but we're going to be able to just assume that as we go from 21 to 31 to 41, that the trend that we're going to see is in place. So what we're looking for are temperatures. Notice that this is 257, 302, and 356. This is in Fahrenheit. In the case of our engines, if your engine case gets to 302 degrees, that's really bad. If it ever made it to 356, are we really concerned about our case material at that point? There's a heck of a lot more that has gone wrong than just the case material. Actually, that's the case if you're even as hot as 302 degrees. But notice that we've got the 257 and the 302 and the 356 down here. And okay, now as far as the value that we're looking for, what we want is yield. So let's take a look at these numbers. That's 18. Yay, 18 room temperature. It starts to get hotter and it starts to get a little bit weaker. 14 versus 13. Notice that the higher aluminum content is still stronger. We go to an even higher temperature. The higher aluminum content is still stronger. 11 versus 12. The higher aluminum content is still stronger. So even at higher temperatures, the higher aluminum content alloy has higher strength. So we're done with that. All right, so we've looked at some properties, and we can see that the as41s are stronger than the as21s, but what could possibly be making Mr. Mechanic think that the as21 is stronger than the as41? And the drag racers go out there and they just beat the living snot out of their case, it doesn't matter what it is, by running like 4 times the amount of horsepower through the thing than it was ever designed for, and running it at 9,000 RPMs, which is like twice as many RPMs as it was ever designed for. So they're beating the hell out of the thing in a fashion that we, the people who simply want to exist with it on the street, they're beating on it in a way that we don't do. And they're then interpreting what they've done as though the case is weaker or stronger. But, you know, I've gone into the salmon, I've looked at all their anecdotes, and you just realize that everything that they do, you build it, it tears up, you modify it, it tears up, you modify it again, and slowly but surely over time, you develop something that it gets better and better and better. And through the process, you go from a cheap AS41 like this to maybe another AS41, and then you'd say, you know, I'm going to break down. Everybody tells me the AS21s are better. I'm going to build a 21. And the 21 ends up working. But the guy got better and better and better at building motors as he came along, and you don't know for a fact that the reason it blew up, tore up, and then didn't tear up was because he became a better engine builder through the process. So I've never been able to look at what they've done and go, yeah, you know, they have a point. That perhaps between 75 and 79, maybe somehow or another, when they poured the castings down there into their sand castings, that they did something different with those things that allowed that case, the AS21, which is supposed to be weaker, to become a little bit stronger. But we don't know. So what about us, the people who just want to drive them? Well, for us, it ends up becoming something like this little line that you see right there. Now, this particular case, which I believe to be an AS41, I purchased brand new. It's never been a line board. It has always existed as either a 1745 or as a 1415. And both of those engines require a 76 millimeter crank, not stock, but 76 millimeters. You see a little bit of, there's a little bit of clearancing that I've done here and there on this case, but it doesn't really require anything up at the top. You don't have to, you know, route out the top in order to get 76 crank in. But after all the miles that I've put on this thing, which is probably somewhere around 80,000 miles, like I say, you can see that right there. And the goal is that I need to be able to feel a ridge. If I try real hard, there's a couple of spots, like right down there. There's perhaps a little tiny bit right in the vicinity of that hole right there. Maybe a little tiny bit. If I come up to the top, it's really, really hard to feel. So after 80,000 miles, there's really not very much of a ridge down in there. And I mean, I'm thinking it's so little of a ridge. It's like, would I really take the time to line bore this case? This is normal driving. In normal driving, it's not going to tear up. Neither one of them are going to tear up. You know, so it's like, why pay up for the AS21 because drag racers who are beating the crap out of the things make some claim for the AS21? For us, it doesn't matter. The guy in the video who made the claim that this case, his AS21 case, has more aluminum and that it's stronger as a result of that, he also tried to talk these people into buying forged aluminum pistons. And we also don't need forged aluminum pistons when we're just driving down the street. So, I mean, I think the guy talked them into spending some money on things that they didn't need. But hey, it's not my engine. You go ahead and build what you want. One other side note here. Maybe I'll reiterate it at the end. The crankshaft that got put into this engine, of course, had counterweights. Don't pay up for an AS21 case thinking that you're going to be able to eliminate that ridge. Elimination of the ridge comes from proper engine building, which involves getting rid of your stock crank, which has no counterweights, and putting counterweights in so that as it spins, it doesn't go yank, 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 and beat the hell out of it. Now, beating the hell out of it over time is not strength. It's something completely different. As mentioned in Wikipedia, it's something called creep. I mean, if this was caused because you've overstressed it, All you have to do is turn the engine on, spin it to spin it to 4,500 RPMs, underload, pull it apart, and you'll instantly have a ridge because you've overstressed it. You've exceeded yield. You've gone through and done a permanent deformation by overstressing the motor. And that's not going to happen. You're not going to overstress it. The ridge is caused by creep. We're still not done. We need to do some more stuff. Well, there's one more thing to look at. You've got the as21, the as41. So the as41 is stronger. The as21 has less creep. And the question might pop up, there's this concept that a used case might potentially have some sort of an issue when it gets hot, and that all of a sudden it spontaneously deforms. So when you come into this particular form thread, help me, as21 or as41 engine case or aftermarket, you come down here just a little bit, Bob Hoover. So let's start off with the first sentence right here. Early Type 1 VW engines are cast of as21 magnesium aluminum alloy, and he is incorrect. So Bob has given us in his very first sentence something that's incorrect. But we don't look at it here. This particular paragraph was lifted out of context. We need the context. So we got to go to his blog. And here we are at the blog. The topic is VW used crankcase from November of 2006. This is about 4 years before he died. Anyway, he says right here right at the top, if you can afford it, always opt for a new crankcase. And I got to agree with that. It's always nice to start with something nice and fresh. But when you get down in here, we start talking about used crankcases. And let me show something to you. Okay, that sentence right there. Metallurgists had no idea that metals could display thermally induced memory properties. All right, and this is the last of these that we're going to read about this memory property. It appears that after aging for several years, the magnesium alloy used in the early VW engines could display some of these memory properties. Now, if you've read Bob Hoover, that is very uncharacteristic of Bob. Bob never says something like, it appears. Bob always takes credit for everything that has been discovered. It's him. He's the guru of gurus. He knows all. So his writing right there told me that something unusual is going on in this thing, so we need to go back up a little bit more and not look at what he's writing any further at this point, because we need to give credit where credit is due. Okay, that sentence right there. On the other hand, experts such as the late Gene Berg declared flatly that a used crankcase should never be reused. That tells us where we need to go next. It tells us where Bob got this stuff. So, off to Berg we go. So over to Gene Berg's, or Gene Berg Enterprises website, and let's take a look at what Berg's got to say about cases, at least some of what he has to say. Let's start with this little piece right here. Germany did make the 1975 and on dual oil pressure fuel injected engines with the back filled. Is that so, Gene? Let's take a look at some photos, people. Okay, just in case you don't know what's going on, do you see this area right here on the left-hand side of the case behind the number 3? There's a nice big flat area right here. All these concavities, and then this big flat area. Here's another angle. It's aluminum case, big flat area right there. Here's a fuel injected case. Found this one on eBay. Do you see a nice flat filled in area right there? No. Here's another one I found on another website that's up for sale. You can see it's got some damage over here, so there's been some welding done. But this side over here is not filled in. This is a picture from CB Performance's website of a current as41 case. Not filled in back here. Okay, so you know what the difference is now. And here's something that I did not realize. You can get an aluminum case that is not filled in back there. I thought they were all filled in back here. But check that out. Found this one on Amazon. Anyway, we need to get back to Berg. Now that we know what kind of quality information we can get from Gene Berg and his writings, let's continue on with the more pertinent piece of information, which is memory alloys. So we come over here. This is the stock VW case, technical information, and let's take a real quick look at why I would say that Berg is the source of what Hoover was talking about. All right, this sentence right here. This, however, substantiated many evaluations I made from my own years of research and development, answered some questions previously unanswered regarding the memory, rigidity, resistance to elongation, and strength, which was reduced drastically. Now, basically what he's listing right there are a bunch of properties that you might think exist in an alloy. But the very first one, memory, is not a property of alloys or metals in general. So he would never have understood that memory is something that should be included in this list. So he picked it up from somewhere. Now, rigidity, maybe. Resistance to elongation, yeah, that's a property. Strength is a property. But, yeah, anyway, where did he come up with this stuff? Oh, and by the way, one thing that's missing here that is a property and that is valid to the deformation is creep. How in the world Berg did not understand the concept of creep when he claims to be right here just having all of his questions answered? But what answered his questions? We got to come back up here. All right, so apparently Berg found a document. The document was written by the Quality Control Department of a major German car builder. It was disclosed that the engine cases made with the as41 material are designed as non-rebuildable items. Okay, so he's read a document. He's kept it out of our hands by not telling us who this major German car builder was. And then we, as the consuming public, have to bow down at the altar of Berg. Berg knows all. Let's all hail Berg. Let's all attend the church of Berg. No, Berg, I want the document so that I can interpret it myself. You want that document as well. Don't let somebody tell you that there's a document and then they don't share it with you. In other words, you're stuck with their interpretation. So let's look at the quality of information that will be contained in this type of a document. Now remember, the Quality Control Department is not a department that understands material science. So they can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. Buyer beware. Let's go take a look. Well, this thing is an absolutely beautiful, like PowerPoint style presentation. Lots of really pretty stuff. Lots of words, pictures, good stuff. All of it designed to impress you. And when you read stuff like this, it's like what you're looking for, things that don't quite make sense. So once you find something that doesn't quite make sense, you begin to doubt a whole bunch of the stuff that sits behind this. And let me point out to you something that is absolutely 100% incorrect. All right, that sentence right there. Strong condensate formation from EGR as exhaust gas is pure H2O. Now, this engine is designed to run with hydrogen as a substitute for gasoline or propane, who knows, alcohols, some other kind of combustion material. But it sucks in air just like our engines do. So if it's sucking in air, your exhaust gas contains everything that's in the air, less some oxygen, which has been mixed in with the H2O to turn water vapor, right? How in the world can you have exhaust gas that is pure H2O if you're inhaling a whole bunch of nitrogen? The nitrogen comes in, it doesn't really participate, and then it goes out in your exhaust gases. You don't necessarily know that when you take something from, like a moly, which produces parts, and you go, okay, they just wrote a technical document, and wow, everything that's in there is going to be perfect and beautiful. So we come back over to Berg and his document right here. Well, that quality control department may have made a monster stupid mistake, just like what was made in that moly document. At which point, you just go, you know, it's a quality control department. They're not qualified to actually pontificate about shape memory alloys. Now, we need to now venture into specifically shape memory alloys, and I will tell you why this does not happen. Okay, let's head back over to Wikipedia and the shape memory alloy page and see if we can't do a little bit more to completely and totally dismiss this concept of shape memory with these cases. Let's go down to the bottom here real quick. All right, here's a list of some common shape memory alloys. The ones that I've highlighted here are the only ones that contain aluminum. If you look through this list, you're not going to see anything with magnesium. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't any with magnesium. Let's go check that out. Okay, we come over to Science Magazine. I mean, what we're talking about here is not engineering. So, a lightweight shape memory magnesium alloy. And the date on this thing is July of 2016. And there's going to be an abstract and a couple other little tidbits here, which is kind of interesting. Well, down here in the abstract, I want to read one particular sentence. Those distinctive behaviors have been observed in many polycrystalline alloy systems, such as blah, 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 but not in lightweight alloys such as magnesium, and aluminum alloys. In other words, as21s, as41s, not known to be there. Now, these guys have found one that works. It's like one of the first, if not the first to ever. And when was this thing written? Once again, 2016. This is 20 years after Berg died. It's 30 years after he would have written that document. All right, let's have another reason why these guys are not shape memory alloys. There's another property that these shape memory alloys have that is completely and totally missing from the as21, as41 alloys. Hang on just a second. Let's go down and find it. Okay, it's this thing called pseudoelasticity. In other words, they have the ability to deform an awful lot before they break or deform or permanently deform. In case you've never seen something with pseudoelasticity, let me show you something real quick. Okay, those of you who wear glasses like I do, you may be familiar with metal frames like this. So let me show you what you can do with these metal frames. All right, this is what is meant by pseudo or hyperelasticity. Okay? I can not only do it with that, I can also do it with the arm of this thing. So look at that. Okay? Bend it back. Okay, you're not going to be able to do that with a magnesium case. They're not shape memory alloys. All right, getting back to Berg in this little document right here. Well, first of all, I don't think that document actually even exists. I mean, it's just the standard thing. Here's a document from a major German car builder, but we can't go find it. So we can't verify it. So I don't think that document actually existed. And here's why. Berg sold goods and services. Somewhere in his warehouse, he must have had rack after rack of brand new cases just sitting there. But people come in, they just want a line board. You know, Volkswagen people, we're cheap. We don't want to buy that new stuff, and we can just rebuild. So he decides, I need to get those things off the shelf. So you know what? Let's come up with something called memory alloy. Maybe he heard it somewhere, somehow, and he decided to apply it to these cases, to move them out. And so many people attend the Church of Berg that without question they will do whatever Berg tells them to do. And you end up with memory. And wow, just mind-blowing. But anyway, let me go back over to Hoover here, and let's take a quick look at one more thing that Hoover has to say. Kind of buried in the middle of this write-up on used cases, he says the following: I want you to understand up front that it is at best an educated guess. He's referring to everything that he's spewing about right here. But he didn't say it up front, and it's not down at the end. It's kind of where you can dismiss it, right there in the middle. But yeah, he's basically fessing up right there that he really doesn't have a freaking clue. So in an effort to do a thorough job, I don't like doing a half-assed job. I mean, there are other people who do half-assed jobs, and their names are, Berg and Hoover, basically. Let's call it what it is. They clearly did a half-assed job. Or they didn't do the job at all and just made claims. I don't know. I don't care. I like to seek out experts, so I started going into YouTube. I figured if somebody's willing to put on social media something about superalloys, it might be responsive to a simple question. So this guy, Taylor Sparks, as you can see down here in the lower left-hand corner right there, that guy happens to work for the University of Utah, because I did a little bit of research on him, and I contacted him through this video. But anyway, he got back to me. And he says, by the way, when I was a kid, our family moved across the country, and we were so poor that we were living in a VW bus for a few weeks. We loved those vehicles, and I was like, oh, hot damn, I've got myself somebody who's going to be able to give me an expert opinion on this. And he never got back to me. I mean, professors are busy. Maybe he had a grant to do, who knows, whatever. But I'm not going to push it. It's like I did more than anybody else, as far as I can know, has ever done on this particular topic. So that's my work so far. Let's see if we can't get to a conclusion. Are all mechanics created equal? Absolutely not. There are mechanics who understand this stuff. Jimmy111, who actually hasn't posted in like 15 years. I bet the guy died. He used to be a fairly frequent poster. But anyway, he understands creep. Says much better creep resistance for the as21 versus the as41. He uses the word much. There are no standards for creep, so you can't really say much, but yeah, it does have better creep resistance. Now, what about that other property? Which one's really stronger? Let's take a look. Well, one of my favorites is Modoc. I've mentioned him before. It's like if there is somebody I'm going to listen to, it's going to be Modoc. The as21 is less likely to crack, but it is not actually stronger. Thank you, Modoc. I don't think we need to spend any more time with the sander. All right, I'm going to close this video out. I think I've said enough. On the top is a counterweighted crank. On the bottom is a non-counterweighted crank. Take your money, spend it on the crankshaft first, and not the case. Don't pay up for an as21 case. I mean, if you didn't arrive at that conclusion at this point, yeah, don't buy the as21. Don't pay up for it. It just doesn't matter. Save your money, put it into the crank. Additionally, if you've never seen a clearanced stock rod, that's a picture of a clearanced stock rod. Now this is going to reduce the mass of it. If you reduce the mass, you reduce accelerations. Accelerations require forces. Forces create vibration. Therefore, that little modification right there on a used rod is going to allow less of this pounding at the center main to happen. That's where you spend your money. A couple of modifications to the rotating reciprocating assembly, not the case.